Okay, thank you very much for joining me. This is really exciting because right now I am hosting the very first roundtable of the People Who Made podcast, all inclusive table. And with me, I have very special guests today. So I have with me Anurag Das, who is a neuroscience PhD student. I also have with me Ninad, who is a building science engineer. And I have with me Abhinav, who's also known as Neil to his friends. And he's working as an AI engineer and data scientist at a big bank in the Netherlands. Now, this table is extremely exciting for me because we have all gone to the same school in Assam. And who would have known at that time that I will be hosting this table and interviewing these very talented individuals who I have seen in the corridors of my school in Assam. So, my big thanks for all of them uh, for joining me today and agreeing to talk about their journeys. All of these people are based out of they've all gone abroad and they're currently not they chose a career that took them from Assam to the west, and for me that was super exciting, and that's the key reason why you are all here together on this table. So my first question to all of you is, did you always know you want to go abroad? Was that always on the cards? How did that happen for you all? Who wants to go first? I can pick. So maybe I'll start with Ninad. Do you want to go just because you gave a thumbs up?
My thumbs up was for your decision to pick, but yes, I can definitely do that as well. Um, no, I guess it's a yes and a no. For me, I think it's a bunch of different situations and circumstances which kind of like led me to the path that I'm on right now. So for me, I don't think it was like a hard and fast decision that this is what I want to do or like this is where I want to go. It's just like a matter of situations. So
That is very interesting. Did you want to
mm.
give example of any specific situation? Like, did you see someone and that they inspired you, or did you feel it was a case of a good opportunity coming your way? Because I think some people just dream of going abroad. Like for them, it's like I really somehow really really want to go abroad. Whereas for some people, they think, oh, it was never on the cards. It just happened, and I went with the flow. Never really planned for it. So I'm trying to understand which category you fall in, like the planner or like the go with the flow kind of category.
Again, I think it's a mix of both. I think for me, there were some issues in my personal life which I wanted to kind of like get away from. So like going far away from home was an option for me at that point. And combined with that, I had gotten a very good scholarship. So it just made sense. But I think the main motivating factor was that I thought getting away from those issues would kind of like solve them on its own. And retrospectively speaking, it doesn't work that way. But I think those two would be my main motivating factors.
I think that's a very super interesting point because I do think that a lot of moves that happen from an escapist mentality, not in the wrong sense, but in the sense that putting yourself out of your comfort zone, going somewhere new and experiencing something new kind of makes you forget things that may not have been that ideal, or also gives you a
Mhm.
chance to experience something new and broaden your horizon. And I think that's cool that you make that point because sometimes I think it's not always about San Francisco or something as like the Golden Gate that people want to go to. It's also a lot about just to have some new experiences, to forget the old experiences. That's why we moved. So that's super interesting. Um,
Mhm.
Anurag, what was your reason? Did you always want to go abroad?
So there are two parts to that. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Can
we
I?
can hear you loud and clear.
So there are two parts to it. There has always been an inner child in me which has been inspired to maybe come abroad because I had that source of inspiration within my close family. Uh, for example, my dad's elder brother uh, and his wife means were scientists in Columbia University in New York City for the longest time since the early part of the 80s. So, and when I visited US as a kid, obviously that stuck to my mind because the early impressions that you get uh, really stick on to you. So I did see that, and it always stayed with me. But I was a small kid then, like it was probably around the time when probably when I first met you, it was like 2010, 2010, so I was in ninth grade. So it was very long ago, but life happens. Obviously, I did end up taking science in my 11th and 12th grade, given the education system in India. Um, but once I joined my undergrad education, like I studied my bachelor's and master's degree in VIT Vellore, so it's an engineering college. I was quite unsure in the first 2, 3 years of the career path that I really wanted, if I'm being truly honest. Like I wasn't sure that I would be pursuing science per se. Like for example, at one point, I remember having a conversation with my mom that maybe I would like to do something like an MBA once my 5 years integrated master's degree in VIT Vellore was over. And I did also enroll in an MBA coaching class at some point, I think in my fourth year in VIT Vellore. But that was also the time uh, I had gotten the chance to do an internship between the summer break between my third and fourth years. And when I did get a research experience uh, in a research institute, I had done a small research internship in Mumbai in ACRECT. So I think experiences do play a part. It's just that if people get the exposure, that definitely plays a role into how we end up deciding things. Because I think once I got that first-hand research experience, and during my fourth year of undergrad, I also worked in a professor's lab in my own home university at VIT. That kind of made me sure that, okay, this is probably what I want to do for the rest of my career. And once I was sure that science is something I want to pursue long term, it made a lot of sense to me that yes, probably uh, seeking new frontiers on the West. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily mean it was US always for me. I did also apply to other places like Europe. So, yep, it just a mixture of a lot of decisions and experiences and exposure. Those are the two key takeaways that I would say: experience and exposure. I think that can play a huge part in making such decisions.
Yeah, because it clearly looks like you've gone into it with an open mind without being tied to one specific outcome, and you have let that define your course and kind of guide you in terms of, okay, this is, I've taken feedback and now this is my next step. And now this is my next step, as opposed to some people who decide this is where I want to get to, and now I'm going to take all the steps that I can to make that happen. So, what has, in making sense of these exposures and experiences, what has been your questioning process? Like, how do you assign weight to these experiences and exposure? Do you go, sometimes, for instance, when I research or when I do something, for me, it's a question of, oh, okay, how is it making me feel? Is it making me feel excited? Is it making me feel it's giving me a challenge? And then I kind of make a decision accordingly. So when you make sense of your experience and your exposure, how do you decide, okay, that is the experience I want, or that is what I'm going to do next? Like, what takes you to decide, no, this is what I'm going for because of this? Like, what's your decision making matrix?
Maybe Abhinav can shed some light into that, or do you want me to answer?
Abhinav can if he wants to do it. If you want to give yours in one word, it'll be good. And then we can shift the focus to Abhinav because he went to Europe and you guys went to US. So I want to
Okay.
bring out that shift
So,
between
so you just want a
US.
one sentence answer? I don't know, means I think as a human being, just keeping it short, if we're given two choices and within a constrained amount of time, if we have the leverage to experience both the things, um, I think we can quantitatively or qualitatively make a choice on based on what the prospects are in both and how it also made us happy as a human being going through that process. Because I did join MBA classes, as I said, in my fourth year of VIT. At the same time, I had joined an undergrad in my undergrad a professor's lab, and working in the lab gave me some excitement, which I felt was very maybe lacking sitting in a prep class going on Saturdays and Sundays and just trying to, clear an examination, which was basically CAT or something. Means it didn't give me any joy. It was
Mm.
something that I was trying to maybe memorize and wrote, these are the techniques to ace an exam. It didn't give me any joy, but the uncertainty of making discoveries in science, I think that made me want to pursue it long term. Yep.
That's super
I don't know
interesting.
any other way to frame it.
No,
I
I
think
think
this
that makes
bit
sense.
over one more, but no is a good answer, I think.
Yeah. What is your take on it, Abhinav? Is that something what motivated you as well, or did you have a completely different reason for going abroad?
So, coming back to the initial question, I wouldn't say it's something that I'd always been planning for. I think the first time I had this realization was around the time, my penultimate year of my undergrad. So I was doing my undergrad back in India, was doing my engineering and physics. And yeah, but for me, it wasn't something super profound, I would say. I was just keen on having better economic opportunities abroad. And so it was a bit materialistic in that sense, also in terms of a better quality of life. So these were things that I found quite appealing. And above and beyond that, I would say there are some elements of Western culture that I kind of identified with. For example, I think in general, Western culture does grant you a greater degree of autonomy, which has its pros and cons, but then that's the kind of individualistic lifestyle that I also would prefer for myself. So yeah, and yeah, I guess I think these were the major motivating factors. Beyond that, okay, I also just really wanted to travel a bit and also explore other cultures, see what the world looks like outside my country. So indeed, but I don't know. I'm not sure if that answers your question because maybe yeah.
No, I think that does, and I think it's actually really interesting because we have very three different perspectives on why people move abroad, and I think yours is a very interesting answer because you have summarized two very fundamental reasons, which is number one, the work culture, and we'll come to it that there exists a difference, and you felt that you connected more with the work culture abroad, and also you felt like the quality of life somehow that abroad seems to promise could be better than the quality of life that you were seeing fold in front of you. And I just wanted to prod this a little bit more. And how did you form that impression that the quality of life might be better? Was it because you received exposure? Or is it because you had read about it? Like, what was it that you felt, no, the autonomy is going to be great? Had you heard from people? Or did you, it was your research? So that would be interesting for me to know. And on the work culture as well, like, was it something again you had gained from experience, or had you read about it? Did you work in India? Did you have any experience which you thought you won't have abroad? If you can shed a little bit of light on that.
Okay, so there's a bunch of different questions. I'm trying to structure it all in my head. But so when I say quality of life, I guess that's comprised of a bunch of different metrics. For example, uh, one major component of quality of life is how much you could expect to earn. And in general, if you compare salaries for my profession, I'm talking about my profession, but if you compare salaries or median salaries, etc., then they tend to be quite higher in certain other parts of the world, like in the States or some European countries. Suppose so I work in tech. So and that as compared to India, and that automatically makes a difference in your quality of life. Besides your income, there are also other things. For example, the kind of place that you live in, what kind of infrastructure is there, the environment, the kind of amenities that you have access to. I think so. All of the quality of life in general is comprised of a lot of different things. So it's hard to pinpoint a single metric for that. But yeah, I had indeed done my research on these things before opting to move. So that was one of the motivating factors. And to answer, I think what the second point you touched upon, which was about the work culture. This is also something, yeah, I heard I also read about, and I also heard, and in general, I'm not only exclusively talking about the work culture, but the culture in general, society in general. I think it tends to be a bit more individualistic, and that's something because when you're back home, you tend to be more reliant on people for a lot of different things. So growing up as a kid, I didn't necessarily always take care of cooking or laundry or cleaning. So some of these things were I wasn't entirely exposed to, but once I did move here, I think yeah, I had to educate myself I had to educate myself on these skills. But at the same time, the trade-off is that you do enjoy a more independent lifestyle, and you have more control over whatever you want to do. And for me, the trade-off is definitely worth it, I would say. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I'm sure it must be interesting for you to learn these life skills by yourself when you move abroad. But you make an interesting point about economic opportunities, and you've mentioned it twice. And I think I just want to put it to all three of you, because I believe there can be it. There is this thing about people kind of, there are different reasons why you go, but there can be a different treatment, or a different, people might view you differently if you say that I've migrated here for economic opportunities, as opposed to you saying I've migrated here for experience, or I've migrated here out of passion, or etc etc. And my question to all three of you is it wrong to immigrate for economic opportunities? Like, should you do it, should you not? What is, like, purely for economic opportunities, what is your take on it?
Is that directed to me, or
I mean, you can go for it. I know you have done it, so you're probably gonna say,
I don't know. I have a really the reason I don't want to because I also have a really strong stance on this. I have a really strong opinion on this. For me, it's a hard yes, a hard absolute yes, because ultimately you are in charge of bettering your own utility, improving your utility, and bettering your quality of life. No one else is going to do it for you. So, and economic opportunities are a big part of that. So indeed, if you feel that moving elsewhere might yield better economic opportunities for you, then you're definitely justified in doing that. And there's no one to judge if that's right or wrong, except you. But like I said, I have to preface this by saying that I do have a strong stance. So maybe someone else can interject.
yeah, or does anyone have a different view here to what he's saying, or someone wants to give as strong as opinion as Abhinav has given?
So I can go, so yeah, means just trying to connect to what Abhinav said and trying to relate back to my own story. So yeah, once I made the decision that science is what I want to pursue long term, I had to gauge out my options. Where can I pursue my further education? So India is obviously one of the places where I could have pursued my PhD, but my master's thesis was in neuroscience, for example. And I didn't receive any primary neuroscience training during my undergrad, because I don't think there are many institutes where there's an undergrad major just focused on neuroscience. In India, mostly if you're covering biological sciences, biotechnology, or even biomedical engineering, I don't think there's a strong specific focus on neuroscience. which I developed as my interest during my master's thesis. So to continue in that part of neuroscience, I was looking at options abroad. Science was the major factor, but when I bring into consideration what I want to do, and if I had a strong opinion on it, it led me to like thinking of career abroad. And obviously, a second factor loops in, which is Abhinav's point. I think as a PhD student, um, I don't know if I'm right in saying this out loud, but I've heard from many of my peers and seniors who have chosen to pursue their PhD in India from very good institutions, nationally reputed institutions, and there are plenty in India, be it IITs, IISc, NCBS Bangalore, from where I did my master's thesis. Uh, Sometimes PhD students face a lot of hardship in getting their monthly stipends. So this is an issue that has been brought to my notice even before I started my own PhD experience. And if someone wants to pursue a career with the peace of mind that they truly seek, I think economical satisfaction is very important. You want your energy to be focused on what you pers are pursuing as the center of your attention, and not to be distressed that, okay, where is my next monthly check coming from? How am I putting two meals on my plate? So I think that problem is negated, or at least is something when I moved abroad, like touch wood, like in US at least, uh, I don't think students face that problem that their monthly checks are delayed for the work that they are doing. I have always received my monthly or biweekly stipends on time.
Mm.
So it gives me a great sense of satisfaction that I can put all my energy and time and resources on just my science and not be thinking about uh, where's this money coming from. And this is something I truly feel bad because I know many peers, seniors who have pursued PhD from India, but sometimes uh, they don't know where their stipend is coming from because sometimes it's delayed. There's a backlog of 2, 3 months at a time for the stipend. So, yep, I think two factors. Once, you need to be sure what you're pursuing, and you need to forage out where is that best opportunity for you. If it takes you abroad because you're keen on that career and it is a better foraging ground for you, then yes, you should do it, because if you can do it with a peace of mind, just focus, being able to put your energy just on your work and not worry about other aspects. That is my outlook on it. Obviously, I do tend to agree with Abhinav a lot because finances are important. It's difficult to sustain in this world without it.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I think delayed stipends or like we also have a culture in India where we hire interns without paying them. And I'm sure everybody in their professional lives who have done internships have experiences of having interned without earning anything, doing internships where there's no payment and you don't know how to sustain yourself. And only those people who can afford to do such internships in different jurisdictions because their parents can afford to pay for their PG fare, rent, etc., can actually take those opportunities because they're not being paid. Or even now, I think with the postings that come out in government, sometimes checks are delayed. So I think what you're talking about here is not so much about, yes, there is the lure of getting higher salaries, but there's also the comfort of knowing there's a predictability to your income cash flow statement that as long
Yes.
as I'm doing my work and as long as I'm showing up, at least the cash flow in terms of what I'm doing. And I think for scientists, that matters quite a bit. I can focus on my research, knowing that my cash flow is not going to be interrupted because there's so and so fund backing me and backing my time. And I don't have to justify why I'm sitting today and writing this thesis or why I'm spending the time talking to people or just in my lab. None of that matters. I get my stipend on time and I get to research.
Yes.
So I think that's an important point. Nina, did you have to say anything? And whilst I put this question to you, I also want to steer the discussion a little bit towards, because Anurag brought up this point, the difference between the education system. Um, Obviously, like the economic opportunities are one thing, and you can say what your perspective is, whether you agree with it or not, but and also if you could let us know what is the difference you have found. Anurag has already given us a hint in terms of professionalism. What has been your experience? How has that differed? Which one do you prefer?
Yeah, so let me phrase my sentences. So for the immigration thing regarding like economic opportunities or whatever, I feel like if you want to go to a different place to pursue like anything, it doesn't even have to be anything. If you just want to go to a different place just to explore, that's fine. I think like moving across borders, there's no right or wrong to it. I think it's like everything all comes down to situations and your own perspective on it. So whatever you feel like doing, as long as you don't do it illegally, I think it's all good. So yes, it's not like black and white, you know. It's all nuances. So that's that. And yeah, if you have like economic reasons and if you want to move for that, yeah, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It as long as you do everything legally, that is. Um, where I stand on that, if I were to give like a more kind of specific view on that one from my own perspective, personally, I I don't I feel like moving to the West or so on and so forth, that narrative is over glorified. And I don't buy that because I think I've been in a different country for the longest time among I don't know about you, Sanya, but between Anurag and Abhinav, I think I've been outside for the longest. Um, and I feel like that is over glorified, number one. And number two, the India that I left and the India that is today, they're two very different worlds. So a lot of the things which might have been applicable for me at 18 might not be applicable for somebody who's 18 right now on 16th February 2025. So that's the other thing. And I feel like there's always, again, there's no black and white. It's always a game of nuances. Um, I have I've had friends and I've dated people who were studying over here doing their, post grad. And like irrespective of where they were from, whether they were Americans or whether they're from a different country, like Anurag, he is pursuing his PhD in the Midwest. I also did my undergrad from the Midwest. The Midwest is very cheap from the stipend that you receive during your education as a student. You can survive. But then you also need to understand that the stipends, they don't vary that much from coast to coast in the US. I don't know about Europe, but at least in the US. So the amount that he earns in Iowa is only marginally less than what he would have earned as a PhD student in New York. However, the cost of living in New York is exponentially higher. It's like incomparable. So the people that I know, the people that I've been with who did their studies, let's say for example, in New York, they were struggling to put two meals on their plate. And they had to like depend the people who were well off, they depended on their parents. That was their fallback option. The people who weren't, they struggled and they had to like work numerous jobs, and that took a toll on their ability to focus on their studies as well, because Anurag was mentioning that it gives you that peace of mind. But that peace of mind doesn't come to everybody. It also depends on exactly where you are and what your individual circumstances like. Um, so yeah, so that's my stance on that. And what was your second question again?
I think,
The education system.
yeah, yeah, I mean, the education. I think what we can talk about is I guess because we're just in that territory, not so much about education, but because we've kind of moved beyond that.
Mhm.
You made the point that the India that you left is very different than the India that is today. And maybe what
Mhm.
you can comment on is, did you find the shift worth it? Like, have you seen a stark difference in the quality of training or education? Because you've done both now. Um,
Mhm.
also studied that you've worked. Have you seen a stark difference in it? Or do you think that difference existed when you first moved, but that's it's no longer the case? So that w- what the kind of opportunities for skill development, etc., in your situation, in your circumstance that you're looking for abroad is easily
Mhm.
available to people who want to stay in India, and that staying in India is actually now cool, and you don't really need to do that east-west shift to feel like you have had a great professional development.
Right. So again, it kind of depends. It depends on the field that you're in. Also, um, in general, that difference between the gap which existed 10 years ago, has definitely reduced a lot. So the gap isn't as significant anymore between, the availability of resources and like the work culture and so on and so forth. Um, a lot of things have become very universal. Like, yes, you can still argue that in India, the amount of money that goes into research funding for higher education institutions from the government is still like a fraction of, let's say, for example, what the US spends on it. Yeah, 100%. But also the US is a much richer country with a much larger GDP, so they have more spare dollars. But still, the situation is much different today than what it was like 10 years ago. So if you're in like a very niche field, but you know for a fact that even right now there's not enough or not adequate resources for you to like do research on that field, or just do your thing basically, and you figure out that, oh, there's like XYZ country which kind of like specializes in this one, and I should go and get myself trained over there. Sure, go for it. It all depends on, your specific field. In my field, I feel like India is actually a lot more advanced than the US, and the US, a lot of it also comes down to the system of governance over here, and like the politics and all of that stuff. Like when it comes to sustainability and energy and so on and so forth, the focus on renewable energies and green technologies. There's a lot of funding cuts in the US, especially currently with the new administration. And yeah, so that's that. And then when it comes to the education, I feel like so education and working. So I have worked in India as well. Like I've done internships. And then obviously I've worked over here. Work culture, I feel like there is definitely a difference for sure, but also I feel like the work culture can be pretty intense, at least for hardcore engineering fields, like the kind of field that I am in, like not computer science, but like actual like physical engineering. I feel like it's not that different between the US and India. I think things in Europe, I think, are just more relaxed in general, from what I hear. But at least between the US and India, there's not a whole lot of difference. Um, and as far as the education is concerned, I, if you had asked me this question even like 5 or 6 years ago, I would have probably said that, yeah, I feel like um, the US high school education system, it probably is a little bit better because it offers more flexibility to what you want to pursue. And I still stand by it. But the way things have evolved over time in the US in my 10 years that I've been here, I might have to like reflect on that answer because yes, I still do agree that it offers more flexibility. So it is probably more beneficial to most people, but then it also kind of like affects your exceptionalism. Like it I think produces a lot of mediocre people but not many exceptional ones. The exceptional ones still come from India and China. So I think there's pros and cons to both. You do need the flexibility, but you also need the hardcore churning that we have back home. And I think it is possible to find a balance between the two. And I think like from what I hear from, some of my younger friends or cousins back home, I feel like the higher education system, as in like high school, middle school and high school in India, has also changed a lot from what we used to undergo when we were back in high school or middle school. And I've only mainly heard positive feedback on that, so I'm optimistic on that one as well. But just to reiterate, I feel like you do need flexibility, but you also need hardcore churning, and then you need to find a middle ground between the two. I feel like America, well, the United States, as of the present, they have tilted a bit too much on the flexibility side, so they're missing out on the exceptionalism part of it. Um, and I feel like that's also not the right way forward.
I think those are very interesting points, and that's a very interesting observation you make, because I think sometimes we kind of miss that. The attraction for some people can just be, I'm ready to go churn and I'm ready to go earn the money, but they don't factor in the point that the cost of living sometimes is so high that it's better to stay in India and work at a mid-level, mid-tier university or a mid-tier firm, rather than go abroad and get yourself enrolled in a university that no one knows about, or go and work some an oblivious job, or something that it's not too high, because then you are going to struggle to enjoy the basic bits about your day, which might have a bearing on other aspects of your life, like dating, for instance, or even just
Mhm.
your social life, right? Because you can only spend that much time and resources which you can save. And if you are spending your time just churning, or if all your resources are just spent on getting your food on the table, how are you going to make time for all these other
Mhm.
aspects which make your life fuller? And I think, do you
Mhm.
think that's a lesson a lot of kids should kind of think about, or that's something they should really consider before getting whitewashed with this whole thing that your educational journey is incomplete without a foreign education stamp on it, or a foreign experience stamp on it? And do you think we need to introduce a level of filtering in our talent as well, who are looking to go abroad, that don't just take any opportunity that comes your way? You are talented, wait for the right opportunity and go when it's actually meeting a lot of your needs, as opposed to just a few of them. Is that something that you would say yes up, or you would say no, no, that's too strong a statement to make?
No, I think I agree with that. I don't know how you're going to introduce that filtering on a mass scale, though. I don't know if that's feasible, but personal filtering, if that's a phrase, that can definitely be used. I think you should be more, I guess, aware and more well-read about everything, the pros and cons and the different shades of silver and the different shades of grays. I think you need to be aware of all of that before finally pulling the plug and making the decision. Um, yeah. So to keep it short, I do agree that I think some sort of filtering is required because a lot of the folks that I know, they actually had it much better and they sacrificed all of that just to be like nobodies. And and they have a lot of regrets, but they take on student loans, la 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 la, la, whatever, and they're caught in a debt cycle. Um, I guess I don't know. I think the only thing I would add to this, not directly related, but somewhat related, is I feel like um, finance and economics, I think some basics of those should be covered in very like high level. It doesn't have to be like in-depth finance and economics, but like at least high levels of finance and economics should be covered in high schools itself, so that people have a better understanding of how, economics works, and how a country's economy and how their job market can affect their own personal lives as well. Um, how economics plays a part with geopolitics, and how that affects your personal finances, because all of this is interrelated. And I feel like a lot of people buy into the whitewashing because they're not aware of these connections, and they just go with whatever they see on mass media. Or like, if I tell them somebody, they would just if I told them something, they would just blindly believe me, because they have the confirmation bias in their heads already, without the own awareness of the interplay of geopolitics, economics, and finance. I think those play a big role.
I think that's super important point you make, and I definitely do think that that kind of training needs to be given early on to kids so that they can make those rational decisions. Also, just how they should project and see their life turning out, because I think sometimes in popular media you have really I don't know, like fake, but exaggerated narratives of how your teens should look like or how your 20s should look like. And I think people who buy into it end up really suffering at the end because the reality kind of somehow gets missed. That maybe if you had a more mellow or chiller 18s or 20s and spent more of that money building financial stability, you'd have a better chance rather than buying into this whole thing of you only live once and just go with the flow and chase the popular without actually giving any thought to how a decision is going to pan out in the next 5 years and where it's going to place you. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
brings me to the question of how did your boys' education schooling fit into it? And I think this is a fun question. And just for context, Don Bosco, where we all studied, was a boys' school, and it only became co-ed later. And I was actually in the second co-ed batch of Don Bosco, and I joined at the higher ranks, and it was still boys' school in the lower ranks. So there were girls in the primary sections, and there were these two higher secondary batches, 11th and 12th, with girls, and all the other classes in between were all boys' school. And I'm just trying to understand how did that education, like the all boys education, mold you? Do you think that made you better placed to navigate the challenges, or do you think it would have been better if you guys studied in a co-ed model, or do you think the effect was kind of moot because you ended up experiencing a co-ed education system as well? If you can throw some light on it. And Abhinav has been quiet for some time, so I'm going to go to Abhinav first. You've had some time to recharge and think while others have been speaking. What's your what's your thinking about it? And you can be absolutely honest. If you felt like, oh my god, Don Bosco should have never become co-ed, and that's totally fine statement to make. Or if you feel like, no, no, I'm just curious to know what's your thinking.
No, in general, I don't think it's a really sound system of schooling to do that, because I feel like so in school you're not just learning academic topics, but you're also learning social skills, and I think like interaction with the opposite sex is a critical component of humans in society. It's something you absolutely need to know how to do, and it's critically important. Like, so the problem with this, like inhibiting this, like artificially inhibiting this, or artificially creating these kind of barriers, especially at the early stage of the development, I feel like it actually tends to stunt social growth and development. So you end up with these, with men or with boys, adolescent boys who are unable to contextualize the opposite sex, unable to contextualize females and say as friends, or as so they can only see them as like sexual partners, or they somehow perceive them as completely entirely different from them. Whereas in society, this is not actually the case. And as you grow up, you interact, you work in a company, you work in a team, you interact with women in a social setting, you interact with them in a romantic setting. And all of these things in these interactions, you need you need to have that level of comfort and some level of understanding of the opposite sex. So it's not something that should repel you, or something that you should be afraid of. So I just feel that like if you kind of segregate these two sexes at an early stage of development when you're growing up as kids, then it tends to foster more like shyness and awkwardness, and it like yeah, like I said, it kind of hinders the development of these key social skills. So I personally do not endorse it. I don't think it's there's any rationale behind doing this. I can't think of any like positive. Maybe someone can correct me on this. Maybe there is some benefit to doing this, but this kind of like social engineering, which is happening on an artificial level. But no, if I were to be like a benevolent dictator and design a schooling system, then it would definitely be like a co-ed system, because there, you get all the benefits that you would otherwise get. You can still have guy friends and from close friendships with them, but also you learn to develop like healthy and positive, like healthy relationships with females or with the opposite sex. Like it goes both ways. So I would also advocate the same for an all girls school. Yeah. So that's my stance on that. Yeah.
That's super interesting. And I wonder what Anurag and Ninad have to say. I mean, I'm glad that that was Don Bosco's perspective when they saw females suddenly run across the corridor, walk across the corridor. And I'm really keen to know what you guys think. And if you've had any funny experience which you want to share when you feel like, oh God, because I had that boys' school thing, I had this funny experience. And if I would have been in a co-ed, it would not have been the case. It could be anything. You felt like you were a bit too shy in a situation, or you felt like that has affected how you bond with people professionally, or you think that, I don't know, it's been balanced out because you guys spent some time studying abroad before actually going into the workforce. So, who wants to go first? Ninad, Anurag, anyone? Anurag, do you want to go?
Yeah, Anurag can go for it.
Sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting perspective that Abhinav put out, that I think maybe it's not right to socially engineer or isolate us by putting us in an all boys or all girls school, which I tend to agree with Abhinav, because I think it builds a lot of apprehensions in our minds of how to interact and how not to interact with girls. Uh, we can only speak from our perspective being boys, but yeah. Uh, but I would also like to point out some positive experiences, just personal experiences of being in an all boys school for 10 years, like one first standard to 10th standard, as you mentioned, Don Bosco, we experienced was an all boys school. I think it gave me personally a lot of liberty to be unabashed in an all boys setting. Because I felt that change in 11th and 12th when I transitioned into co-ed, that as Abhinav mentioned, we lacked the social engineering, maybe of how to communicate in a setting where both the sexes coexisted. But during 1 to 10, I think compared to some of my friends in other co-ed schools, in an all-boys school, I don't think I had to think twice before speaking out my mind in class, being afraid that other people would judge me, because the way boys are engineered, they don't simply care. Like even if I say something very extreme, not that I would in a class setting. I was always a very like proper guy, if I can put it that way, in school. But let's say means I actually had a very good experience from 1 to 10 grade, and I think it gave us also a lot of liberty just to be ourselves in an all boys setting, like to indulge in sports and like build a lot of strong camaraderie. Like I have a lot of good friends from Don Bosco. Means some of my closest friends, maybe guys who I can count on the tip of my fingers, like 10 of my closest friends are my friends from Don Bosco. Means I may not be in Guwahati, but let's say I need some help. Uh, if there's any medical emergency in my family or anything, I can call them and they will answer me. But I don't think ever since post 10th grade, like after 10th grade, I have built friendships, but they have never been like the ones I have built in school, like the friendships. Uh, I'm still sustaining those friendships built in those 10 years uh, from when I entered Don Bosco in this January of 2002 as a 6-year-old and uh, till like 2012 when we terminated with our 10th grade education. Because I think a very different world came into being when girls came into our schooling system, which is good from a social perspective. We should be aware of how to interact and coexist. But I think at least what I witnessed from a personal experience, uh, I saw that camaraderie going missing somewhere in 11th and 12th. I felt like where in a school setting, boys used to like back each other up and prioritize each other. Some of my own friends, I don't want to name anyone per se, but their priorities became like, oh, can I go up and talk to this girl? There means earlier it used to be about more like, okay, education or like doing some social activity together or like excelling in sports. But maybe that's because were forayed into a unnatural setting, and that's why people's behavior changed dramatically in 11th and 12th. But some people, obviously, the ones who were like very focused and their priorities never changed. Those were also examples, but I'm just citing the other extreme. And there is some middle people maybe just didn't care because for me, like 11, 12, I hardly went to school. I missed the greatest number of days in 11th and 12, like more than 20 days each. Uh, I was just going through a hard time, but yeah. Uh, I actually had a very good positive experience during my first 10 formative years in Don Bosco being in an all boys school. So I know Avinav brought a different side to it, but I just want to highlight the positive aspect of it, the camaraderie, the bonding, the long lasting friendships that I still cherish. And I know those are the guys. I don't have like blood brothers, like siblings. I only have a younger sister, but those are the guys I know. Even if I call today, let's say I say like my father is in the hospital, they will be the ones to show up. And I'm not making this up, that has actually happened. So
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
it has given me friends
So
for a lifetime.
yeah, no, just to follow up on that. So would you say in a setting where like maybe you were co-ed from the get-go, do you think you would still have been able to forge such strong friendships, or do you think that that would have been something like that would have been an impediment, or you think the friendships wouldn't have been as strong in the counterfactual scenario?
Do you want Ninat to answer that or me, since I laid out a very strong opinion?
I think that's for you.
Okay. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. If it
No,
from the
it's
very
hard because it's a counterfactual. So like you can never like know for sure. But like, what do you think would have been the case?
So I can say, for example, right around the time that you entered Don Bosco, Sanya, for example, maybe it was 2013.
I think it was 2010.
2010, my bad. So my bad. Around the same time, I think even my younger sister, who is 9 years younger to me, entered Don Bosco from the lower ranks, starting in kindergarten, and they went up. So I can view it also obviously from an outsider's perspective, but uh, I don't think they had any problem per se, but it was more of a, I don't know how to answer Abhinav question. I don't think it would be an impediment, just to be put it shortly, because I have gone on to make very good friendships with female counterparts, maybe since VIT days, like my engineering days at VIT Vellore, or even I have had earlier friendships and bondings. I have known you for the longest part. We have been in contact for 10 years. I know we have not been maybe super close, but I was closer to maybe, for example, someone like Shrishti. Shrishti was a very good friend of mine since maybe I was in ninth grade, and we were super close. Like I have gone to her house as a friend. She has come to my house, and it's like just as a friend, as a platonic friendship, where just people where people can like maybe care for each other the same ways I cited the example where boys were there for each other. But I don't think it would have been an impediment, just that uh, I think when you're socially engineered from a small age that you can coexist equally with girls and boys, it doesn't play a big role. But when you are put in an unnatural setting after being in a boys' school from 6 years old, and suddenly when you turn 16 or 17, you suddenly during your 11th and 12th grade, you're put in to coexist with girls. Some guys react very unnaturally. That's at least what I saw from an outsider's perspective, if I
Yeah.
can put it.
That's super interesting. Though I think the only objection I have to that is St. Mary's was not very far away from Don Bosco. And I think maybe the competition was not existent in your face as long as you guys were not co-ed. But it's like myth has gone on, and everybody knows that once school was over, the competition would be on the streets to see who was speaking to who from St. Mary's, right? So I guess, and I think my experience was when I entered in 2020, I felt like because you just didn't know what to do with these people who were now there, maybe it kind of became like a challenge because you have something new to observe, and you can't avoid it because we're all participating in all these competitions and social events together. And now you see these people, you are going to observe them, you are going to pass comments, and you are going to see them as a challenge. Like, okay, what do we do with all this interest now? We are curious, we are interested, and I can't even imagine the plight of those in the middle because you had all these like cute kids in the lower sections, and you are like, okay, we feel so much adoration for these cute people because now they're all performing these performances and singing these songs which were just done by boys before, and now you have these cute angels coming and singing. So I think there's that level of softness that you guys experience, that it's not just the champs, now we also have these girl angels coming in. But at the top level, you have these like senior women out there, and you just don't know what to do, and you are in the middle. So I think that can be a bit of a interesting experience, or at least I felt I had to fight for like my entitlement. As an example, like I had this bus ride, and I remember it was just me in that bus that used to pick me up, and I used to be like, okay, where do I go? And I felt like, oh my god, I'm entering the boys territory who have been here for 10 years, and now I have to justify them how I am as much a Bosconian as you guys are, though I don't know half the code or half the jokes that you guys have had about Bosconians. So I think for me as well, that was a good thing. But I mean, I do think when you say about boys having the freedom of not caring too much about what we want to say, I think that's just an entitlement that's given to you people. You can go and be yourself in whatever social setting. So if you get a chance to kind of mellow that down and bring in that filter early on, maybe that's actually a good thing as opposed to experiencing in that later. And maybe the solution is not to demark, like isolate you, and I quite agree that competition comes up with like dating and all, and so many friendships break down when people have this conflict, and I have seen friendships break down as well, because say you have friends who date and then they go their different ways, and then your group is suddenly just disappeared, and that will not happen probably in a boys school because your core memories are with your blood brothers, non-blood brothers. But maybe the solution then is to introduce some sort of mentoring in school that teaches you to prioritize friendship bonds and gives you perspective on how to handle these difficult emotions or these difficult situations early on, so that you always graduate with a healthy perspective and not with this animosity in your head, or like these difficult relations with your friends. What would you think about it, Ninad?
So you said a lot of things, Sonia. I don't remember all of it. I was kind of zoning out for a minute. But in general, I think I do agree that co-ed schools are the way to go, both for girls and for boys. I don't think having an all-girls school or an all-boys school is a good thing.
Hmm.
Um, I think both has more cons than pros in my perspective from what I've seen and observed. And for an all-boys school, I think, yes, I agree with Anurag that there was a lot of camaraderie and there's a lot of very strong brotherhood and, so on and so forth. However, I feel like later on in life, like my brotherhood with somebody that I was friends with for 10 years in Don Bosco is important, and it's important to them as well. But once you're an adult, other things also come into the picture and they also become important. For example, having a healthy relationship with your significant other. And I think that's where the real struggle starts coming up. Because I feel like if we have our formative years in single-sex schools, we don't under we don't really understand or get to know the other sex up until a very, very long time. And by the time that starts happening when you're in college, you're already like 19, 20. So the formative years are already kind of over. And it's very, Anurag is a neuroscientist, he'll know this. It becomes more difficult to learn things as you grow older. So I feel like a lot of those things they could be avoided if we just start off with the natural selection, which is like a co-ed school, and you know how to behave with the other gender because you understand them. Um, so yeah, I feel like society would be in general, again, that's my hypothesis. In general would be more healthy if like single sex schools did not exist. And I say that for both all girls and all boys because I've seen a lot of girls toxic AF. They come out from all girls schools and they admit to that. So they acknowledge that as well.
Interesting. I think this is very interesting, and this could definitely form a topic for another episode. So maybe I'll have a round two of this roundtable where it's just going to be dating from boys' perspective, what's going wrong, and east-west dating. That's not for this one, but I definitely agree with the point, and I take it on board that understanding can only develop through exposure. And the delayed your exposure to the workings of the opposite gender, the delayed is going to be your understanding, and the delayed is going to be your experience of a fulfilling companionship. So maybe in the
Mhm.
interest of all of that, it's better to start that exposure as early as possible. But I would probably add that with proper mentoring, just to make sure
Yeah.
that whatever you're going through, you learn to process it in healthy ways without falling into destructive patterns of I can't deal with it and now I'll miss classes and my performance suffers and my grade suffers and those things. So I think that could be something we discuss, take on board. So we're running short of
Mhm.
time. And there are two important things I want to cover. You guys have spoken a lot about your journeys. One important thing I want to know from you, and this is again just in terms of the most exciting science development that you're watching out for. And I think this is important just in terms of your perspective abroad and how do you see Assam coming up and what are you most excited about seeing in Assam, because Assam is obviously trying to prioritize science quite a bit and tech quite a bit. So from your perspective, I think where do you think the best innovation is happening, or where do you think the best development is happening, or where do you think we are lacking? Any observation, it could be something that you're excited about, it's something that you're not excited about. And obviously after that, the fun activity, which is building our recipe from whatever we have heard about your journeys so far, for anyone who's going to try and reach where you are today. So we're going to go to the recipe, and I'll give you some time to also think in the background what's that going to be. And if you're not sure, I have a dish in my mind which I'm going to ask you for the ingredients for. But before that, the the tech development that you're most excited about or not excited about. I'm going to start with Ninad. I think you're the
Okay.
most energy left because you are giving very, very brief and very to the point answers. So I think I'm going to let you do the talking now.
I mean, this is going to be brief as well. Um, so I am most excited about the semiconductor industry coming up, and I feel like that's a formidable step forward. Once the manufacturing plant starts, the fabrication begins. That's like the first step. And then after that, the development of the technology can follow through. But I think the fabrication is always the first step. And I hope the follow through is done, because I think there were plans of like developing a completely different industrial city for that one, to accommodate all the new employees and, the executives who will be coming through for the semiconductor plant that's being manufactured. And I hope to see that entire semiconductor ecosystem being developed, right from the R&D to the manufacturing, and the universities and the institutes playing a part in that as well. That's number one, because that's already happening. Number two, Assam is in a very, very good location, geographically speaking, for the usage, or well, I think usage is the right word, for the usage of renewable energies, whether it's mostly it's hydro, but there's also quite a bit of potential for solar. And I feel like there's a lot of push for that as well. Like I mentioned initially, like India is doing really well on the renewable energy sector. They're really pushing for it, and I think oh, and also hydrogen fuel cells. So I think there's a lot of scope for the development of a hydrogen fuel cell infrastructure in Assam, along with renewable energies such as hydropower and solar energy. Um, so these would be like, I guess, like the three or the four biggest things that I am looking out for and excited about. And on top of that, I would just add in general that I think in all of these industries, machine learning and artificial intelligence would have a huge role to play. And I would love to see research institutions and the private sector kind of like joining hands and kind of like proliferating that as well in the state. And I think Abhinav might know more about this because he's in the field. But yeah.
Yes, I was going to go to Abhinav. I think those are very key industries that you've picked, and some industries that I'm specifically interested in as well, including renewables. And it's just super exciting. The great
Mhm.
expectations of hydrogen and whether it'll become a SAM superpower. Abhinav,
Mhm.
what do you think? What's going to be, what is it that excites you about science in a SAM?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a bit biased again. Yeah, also I'm really passionate about the applications of AI in our lives. I think it's revolutionary. It's also pervasive in the sense that you can integrate it into so many different things, and and we're starting to see that. Although right now I also feel like we're only scratching the surface of the iceberg. There's so many more things that we could potentially do, and so many different sectors that we could apply this thing to. When it comes down specifically to Sam, I think, yeah, for example, like the energy sector could definitely use a lot of like automation in different processes. And there could be tools for monitoring like stuff like energy efficiency and pollution levels, also like climate change, etc. I think I can see a lot of like applications for AI in these regimes. Going about, for example, also like in indigenous industries, like for example, tea plantations. For that's one thing that Sam is quite known for, and then uh, we could implement AI in a lot of the individual links of the chain to greatly boost their productivity. And yeah, just going above and beyond that, also make the the population at large more tech savvy or tech aware and able to use all of these like different Gen AI tools that we have at our disposal, and that we will have soon even better tech to be able to use them and understand them. Like I always see it's becoming quite transformative. For example, my mom, she isn't the most tech savvy person, and it tends to be the case in like the earlier generations. But even her, like now I notice her that she's like constantly looking up things and like asking ChatGPT for advice and stuff. And that's I'm really happy to see that, like, the people are starting to adopt these kind of technologies and learn more about the world, and hopefully it's making their lives better. So yeah, I'm quite optimistic about the potential for AI. In transforming society as a whole, but also like back in the hometown. Yeah.
Interesting. I think that's a very pertinent point because it's one of those evils, I think, which is here to stay. So it's better that you learn how to tame it before you get tamed by it, and you learn to incorporate it in ways that actually increase efficiency while being conscious of its destructive power. I would think I'm always a bit skeptical
But
about AI.
no, I totally agree with you, but I also will not use that term specifically. Like, I think that's a negative connotation, and I personally would, yeah, being in the industry myself, I would definitely see it as a really positive, transformative tool, rather than something that's well, it could be destructive, but I would not term this evil. Yeah,
Yeah, so maybe like a positive thing that just needs a bit of caution so that,
exactly.
like a Black Mirror kind of situation.
I think
Those
that's what we
still
need to
want
do.
Black Mirror. So that has resulted in me being very fearful about most automations. So I'm still the postcard person. I much prefer that. Anurag, on to you. The science and tech development that you're watching out for Assam or
I think
India.
I lack a perspective since I'm not exposed to that much technology, and like I'm not from a core engineering or computer science background like they are. But from what I have been exposed to, I can say at least since COVID has happened, I think the Assam government has uh, put in a lot of efforts and energy towards developing a lot of hospitals in a lot of different areas, which are maybe not accessible, so that people can avert those situations. Let's say, God forbid, touch wood, another pandemic happens or like such a health scenario arises. So I think a lot of state government medical colleges have come up in smaller areas. So that's good in terms of the health accessibility. Other than that, just related to my field, maybe it would be nice. IIT Guwahati is obviously there. It's a premier institute. I would like to see maybe another devoted national science center, like maybe ICER or like a NCBS or like a Tata Institute devoted to the natural sciences be built up in Assam. I think that would give a lot of exposure to a lot of emerging people in science focused in the natural sciences, not only biological sciences, it can be physics, maths, chemistry, so that they know that there is something for them beyond the IITs and the traditional engineering routes,
Hmm.
which at least I wasn't exposed to in my 11th and 12th, because when you're in science stream, being a 11th and 12th student, the only thing that you know is either you go medical or engineering, which is fair and good. Uh, People are doing well. My parents themselves are doctors. Uh, I see two brilliant engineers in front of me, but uh, it would have been nice to know that places like ICER and IIC exist. And IIC, as far as I know, is better than IITs. Like it's the best in the country. I didn't know those institutes existed. So if something like a ICER can be built up in Assam, I think it would give a lot of exposure to someone who is keen on pursuing research.
Yeah, I think that's super important because seats are always quite limited, and I've always thought this that the more you glorify a specific institution or a specific tag, the more problems you create because there's this competition and this scarcity mindset that if we don't get it, nothing is ever going to be as good as it. Whereas actually, we have had really exceptional talents come out from not such big organizations, and they probably didn't think that just because they're not in the so-called top place, they have any less shot of producing the next path-breaking invention or the next path-breaking discovery. So I think that's a very, very valid point you're making. And Assam is making progress, right? We are seeing institutions come in. IIT is doing really well, and now we have NLU Assam as well. So in terms of law. So that has been a positive development. So I'm sure, hopefully, we'll see more things come up. Exciting. So we've got three different perspectives. One is more education centric, one is AI centric, and one is obviously the more industrial centric observation of the Nard. And I think that's a very good overall perspective of how Assam I think is taking a more three-dimensional approach in these years compared to the previous years, where it was just more about a new road being built. So I'm glad that we have something more to talk about other than which bridge is being built or which road is being built. Now to the more fun part of building the recipe. So this is something we discussed before we started on the episode. We are going to hand out a recipe from this particular episode to those who are listening and those who want to follow your paths. So we can pick a specific dish. I know we're talking about states and we're talking about Netherlands, and I'm trying to see what's common. People like fries, people like waffles, people like Coke. So you've got to pick which one do you want, or there's coffee and there's tea, and maybe we can call it, unless you have some better term, like I don't know, the leap of science coffee, the leap of science waffle, or the bridge, the building bridge, or the immigration, the science immigration thing. What would you like to call it? And then I'm going to ask you to throw in some ingredients so that those who want to follow your path should just take a bite and they will get the clarity that you have and reach where you have reached today. What should we go for? Waffle, pancake, a beverage? Anyone? Ninat seems excited about it. I think he's a foodie. I don't know why. He just seems, his face has lit up. It didn't light up on any other question, but I really saw his face light up when, as soon as I said spoke about food. You are a foodie, is my guess.
I do
Ninad,
like food.
yeah, he knows the
Yes.
best places in New York City. If you're ever visiting New York City, go with
Yeah,
him. He'll take you
yeah,
to the places like a local life.
yeah. I
But
just feel make it to New
Anurag is
York.
a better cook. Anurag is a better cook. He's like one of the finest bachelor cooks I've seen in my life on a personal basis.
That's amazing. We've got to make sure that the New York wait doesn't forget. We have a Netherlands representative in the house, folks. So we have to make sure there's a dish that transcends boundaries. Probably Assam. So which one should we go for? Ninad, do you have any preference?
I don't have any preference, to be honest.
Abhinav, do you want to pick the dish of the day that we're going to cook?
Just maybe a science cocktail.
A science cocktail. Are you on board with it?
Yeah,
All right. So the science
absolutely.
cocktail, what should be the ingredients for the perfect science cocktail that's going to land people where you are today?
I think I can go first. Means I think my takeaways would be anyone willing to like venture out of their comfort zone and maybe try pursuits abroad. I think they should be first of all open to experiences, and second of all, they should not be afraid to experience something new. Like, I think it's kind of similar, but I think exposure is very important. That's the reason to make an informed decision. Exposure and being open to experiences. That would be my two takeaways.
Amazing. I think both very, very good points. Abhinav, what are you going to throw into the cocktail?
So is this like a linear, like so how you like the progression is it a linear progression we do from or is it just like a random variables that might be important in any part of the process?
I think maybe throw in what you felt was key for you
Right.
to make the move that you made or that has helped you in decision making, because I guess the theme more or less from this episode that we have gathered is a lot about you guys making decisions about the best prospects in light of the realities of your specific individual circumstances. And I think a lot of people struggle with that kind of clarity and that kind of decision making. And whilst knowledge is key, like we all know, I have sensed very individualistic, I don't know, individualistic variations in your journey. Like having, for you, I felt like having the guts to prioritize better economic opportunities, I think leads you to your dream job abroad. And if you don't have that guts, which comes with certain sacrifice, then you're not going to land at the big bank that you are in. So maybe that's there. Or it could also be something like, if you want the science cocktail, which helps you become this, you've got to just fine tune your social skills or whatever it is, because it involves interaction. So whatever you thought was important, or someone gave you a cocktail, you feel like that is what I wanted, or I should have gotten, or I'm glad I got it, which helped me take the right decision and reach where I am today.
Yeah, so to say like I think there are a few things that are super important. Number one, it's is to do your own research and be like really well informed before you make uh, such a decision, because obviously there are going to be consequences, and yeah, the grass is not always green on the other side. You need to be prepared for what's out there, and because yeah, on a superficial level, yeah, social media, etc., might portray a very different picture from what life truly is like. And one thing people don't maybe realize is it's indeed quite hard, uh, and you really need to adapt to a completely different environment. In some cases, that might involve learning a new language. That was the case for me. But that's not even the hardest part. The hardest part is just like the lifestyle, as I said, is quite different. And you need to be way more independent and self-reliant and taking charge of a lot of different things. So you need to fend for yourself, because no one else out there is going to do that. So you need to be prepared for that. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So there are some certain qualities that I think would be essential to this cocktail, and like I would say, like, you need to be courageous, you need to be tenacious, you need to be persistent, perseverant, you need to be determined and disciplined in your outlook, like always, like have a goal in mind and be set on that goal, because things are going to go off track a lot, and things are always going to subvert your expectations, not necessarily what you want or what you had in mind. And you have to be adaptable to it. And adaptability in general is a really important trait to have. You need to be always willing to change, to learn new things, to give up on old things, and you need to be acceptable to change, because that's just part of life, and it's super important, especially when you're moving to a completely different environment. You need to have the tenacity to deal with different difficult life situations that might arise, and persevere through them, get through them. So I think technical stuff, knowledge, etc., is of course really important to make your way in life. But I think these mental traits are absolutely key to if you want to be successful living by yourself abroad. And but the upside is, if you are indeed able to do all of that and get through all of that, then the reward is also proportionate. So yeah, but that's just a choice that you have to make in an informed way. Like don't just go out there with unrealistic expectations. Just know what the trade-off is, and then make a decision if that's something that suits you personally. Yeah.
That's a whole lot of points that have gone into the cocktail, which I think is now definitely a big picture we have, rather than a cocktail of like sangria that people can drink. I think the key points I took from a lot of yours is actually summarized into this key skill. You mentioned it about adaptability, because I think everything kind of falls in there. The points that you've made about being courageous, yes, but I think adaptability is super key, and I can sense that is like one of the bigger challenges people face. So amongst all these different points about acceptability, that things are going to be different, and adaptability, to make the most out of the situation, I think is key, and I think that also reflects a lot on your journey. So I think that's super key. Ninad, what would you add to the science cocktail that someone can drink? And maybe what we're leaning towards now is more about making the most out of a career in science, and reaching like your true potential. So, what do you think is you would add to the science cocktail?
I think Anurag and Abhinav they've covered like 99.99% of everything. I don't
Yeah.
really have much to add. I don't know. I would just say like being specific to science, for example. I don't know, just curiosity probably. I know it's kind of vague, but and I think curiosity also goes kind of hand in hand with open-mindedness, adaptability. Um, and yeah, just like curiosity for different possibilities. Curiosity also leads you to explore other options, which are probably not as um, what's that word? Like not as widely known or widely available. Anurag was saying, and I kind of relate to that. Like when we were in high school, um, like Anurag, he didn't know about certain institutions or like certain pathways that he could have followed because when you study science, the conventional routes are either medicine or engineering. So I think if you're curious, it would kind of motivate you, persuade you to explore options beyond engineering and medicine. Like from a personal experience, I had no idea that finance, for example, could be such a lucrative field. Had I known it, maybe I could have done something with it. So I guess I was probably not curious enough to explore that particular option. So I guess, yeah, so curiosity, I think that's the only thing that I would add because I feel like um, Abhinav and Anurag have added all of the others.
Yeah, so I think that's super cool. So where we are leaning towards is maybe we have built a cocktail that people should drink in order to decide whether or not a career in science is for them. Because I think what I'm getting from the nod is be curious and don't just do it just because it's the cool thing to do. So make sure it is what you really want to do. And like, I really wanted to be a doctor, but after exploring my options, I decided not to pursue science and do the white coat because I realized it wasn't for me. So I decided not to be the cool kid and take commerce instead. So that was interesting, or I think it was the right choice. And Anurag has obviously put up that yes, if you do go in, and he's someone who's clearly exhibited a lot of passion, I think, by choosing to go the academic route. But you still have to be open minded to make the most out of the opportunities that you're getting. And Abhinav obviously has put in a lot of the hard work that he has put in into his career. So his ingredients stem from that adaptability and knowing that things will not work out the way you want. So I think science does require you to be quite tenacious and patient because I think the rewards come a bit later and they're not as immediate as in finance, perhaps. So that is
Like
the
I would
is that not right, Abhinav? You don't agree?
no, I agree, and I would even I would even say we shouldn't even be thinking in the sense of the ultimate reward because you
Mm,
don't know if that's gonna come, and like this whole approach of of goal-oriented thinking that okay, I'm doing this now, so I get there. I think you should focus more on the process and doing things right in the now. You
mm,
don't have there's a lot of uncertainty with the reward. A lot of things might go wrong along the journey. So
mm,
I think being tenacious, being resilient is absolutely critical. Because things are going to go wrong and lots of bad shit is going to happen, and
mm,
you really have to um, be resilient enough to deal with this. Yeah.
I
So
think
so
even
yeah.
I wanted to add to that before Abhinav spoke up. I just didn't want to interrupt you. I think it's that's what I wanted to say. It's important to have the right intentions on in your heart.
mm,
If you're wanting to move abroad, let's say just a hypothetical situation for someone just because your better half is moving abroad or you have some different ulterior motive, but this is just a way to reach that. I think you'd be very dissatisfied in the process. Uh, like for example, my goal here coming to US was to do science, to have better accessibility to science. But if I, let's say, just moved here to have a better lifestyle, which is fair enough, like economic reasons, I said, you need to know that you're getting a secured paycheck at the end of the day to have two meals in your uh per day. But I think the means you should be true to your goals. You should not deviate too much, and that way, I think it will be more rewarding if you're seeking shorter term outcomes rather than a long term goal. Uh, People might feel very unrewarded in the process because it's a difficult life outside. As Ninad, Abhinav, everyone has iterated, and I'm reiterating the point. Might sound redundant, but it's a difficult life outside. You might feel very isolated. You experience a different culture. So move abroad, not only for science, but for any other field, only for the right reasons, and not for any short-term goals.
Yeah. And also, like a little caveat to that, I also realize now that we both in Cohesion kind of painted a more grim picture. There are also a lot of upsides. I actually had a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed my stay here quite a lot so far. I made a lot of really cool friends here. Some of them I have built close friendships with. I had really colorful experiences. So there are lots of upsides like that as well. It's not entirely gloomy, but there's definitely that. You can definitely have fun whilst doing your work, while like pursuing a career. You can have a really good time. It's just that you need to be prepared that that's not the whole story, and that there's different facets to it, and you need to be prepared for whatever comes your way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think both if you make interesting points, because if your expectation is that I want to move abroad so that I can have fun the way fun is advertised on the West by Western media, that's gonna set you up for disappointment, because fun in itself without professional fulfillment or without professional certainty will become just an escape, and you may not enjoy it. And at the same time, some people go in there really passionate about hitting their goals and really keen to professionally develop, but really suffer because they don't know how to have those colorful experiences, or how to make the most out of the social opportunities that exist, or how to really adapt. So I think that can definitely form the topic of another table. Maybe I'll call you guys, or we'll have like a bigger table. So those are key points that we need to explore. And just because we're on colorful experiences, who will you share this cocktail with? And I will let you go after that. I'm going to start with Anurag. Shishti can be the one, or you can choose someone else. Now that we know Shishti is a good friend of yours, who will you share this cocktail with? This
I
can be
think
your dream guest.
I think
It
my
can be
fiance is gonna kill me if I don't say her name, so I'm just gonna say my fiance. I'll
Yes,
leave it
this
at
will say his name. It can also be a dead person. It could also be like a person who exists, a future leader, a dream guest,
no. I
anyone.
just like to say my
So
fiance.
sweet. So I think your fiance. Who do you want to share this cocktail with?
Yeah, at the risk of being cliche, I would say it's my mom, because I think she was quite instrumental in me having me this whole journey. So without her, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So yeah.
That's very sweet. That's really sweet. And I think sometimes they don't give our parents as much credit as they deserve for the role they play. So I think that's pretty cool that you want to do that. Ninad, who do you want to share this cocktail with?
Putting me on the spot, I don't know. I'll share with my mom as well. It's
You
an
can
easy option.
any name. I think I once named Taylor Swift, so it's absolutely fine. But I think mom is really cool as well. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Great. So we have a very wholesome cocktail making experience here today, with family taking priority over everybody else. And I think that's a cool message to send across as well. Like, make time for fam and like close relationships in your pursuit of your goals. So with that, I think we can come to a close. Thank you so much. I think this has been a very interesting session. And I'm sure there'll be follow-up questions, or I'm pretty sure I'm going to get you guys back soon on the table to discuss some of the themes that we have discussed in this episode. Thank you again.
Yes, I think the takeaway is that the women in our life play an important role.
Yes, I think that is actually, yeah, I think that's a key last word, that behind all successful men is a woman who may be the fiance, or may be the mother, or maybe the wife. But there has to be a woman behind you. Now I need to do like a girls' roundtable to figure out how many of them will share it with their better half or with the men in their life, and maybe they'll all say yes or they'll all say no, and that'll be like a nice reality check to check who does the better job of supporting. So that'll be interesting. Thanks. I've got a lot of good ideas for my next roundtable, guys.